Okay, so let's go into methane.
Yeah.
Give me the science. Was it like 80 times more polluting than carbon, or?
It depends how you measure it. There's not a simple answer because methane breaks down in the atmosphere quicker.
Okay.
Yeah. So it has a life of between 9 to 12 years, some say 14 in the atmosphere.
Okay.
So it's hard to do an apples for apples comparison. While it's in the atmosphere, it's actually 200 times more warming.
Okay.
But it only stays in the atmosphere for a short time. So what people do is they say, well, let's measure the average global warming potential over 100 years. And they'll say, well, it's only 28 times worse than carbon dioxide. But then more recently, people have been saying, well, hang on, we haven't got 100 years to sort out this thing called climate change.
Yeah.
We are working to a much shorter time horizon of more like 20 years. So we should look at its potential global warming factor over 20 years. And over 20 years, it's between 80 to 86 times more warming than carbon dioxide. And that's the factor that I use.
Right. And so, but it does break down.
Does break down into carbon dioxide.
Okay, into carbon dioxide. Okay, and that's just a natural process.
Yeah, there's these little particles in the atmosphere that will break it down. There's some issues there as well. Because of wildfires, they're not breaking it down as fast anymore, so it's actually staying in the air for longer.
Okay,
Yeah.
but carbon dioxide itself doesn't break down. It just gets recycled by plants.
It can break down over like 100-year plus period.
And to those people who say, no, having lots more carbon in the atmosphere is great because we get greening, what do you say to that?
Well, you get the wrong sort of greening. I don't have a garden shed anymore because the neighbour's tree fell on it. The reason the neighbour's tree fell on it, I know because I talked to the arborists, and they're the people close to the action. They're the ones who see the impact of climate change. And they said, I can tell you why that tree fell over. Number one, there was a flash flood, and we're having more extreme weather conditions. Number two, that tree there, because of extra carbon in the air, is 50% bigger than it was ever designed to be. And so its weight is huge, and it doesn't have the root structure to support it. That's why it fell over on your garden shed. So yes, it was bigger, but that's actually causing more problems. So it's not a good thing.
That feels like a very niche argument, a tree in your back garden.
That's an example of, so what I'm saying here is, and I looked at the research says that yes, there's more carbon, yes, it makes plants grow faster, but it doesn't actually increase their nutritional qualities. They don't have it's kind of like if you give a child growth hormones, yeah, they might grow taller, but there's going to be some consequences.
And so with methane, what are the primary sources of methane emissions? Where's it coming from? Obviously, I know cow farts. Well, it's burps, actually, isn't it?
Burps, yes.
Yeah, I know that's
three main
one.
sources.
Yeah.
Yeah, so fossil fuel industry, so oil, gas, and coal extraction is a byproduct of that, because when you hit coal or gas, you also hit methane. And often that's just flared, or sometimes it's just freely vented. Second is, yes, agriculture, what comes out of both ends of a cow or an animal. And then the third is landfills or waste generally. There's some other areas as well, rice fermentation, but they're the big three.
And are you saying they're about a third each?
Well, officially, landfills is a distant third.
Okay.
But unofficially, because of the NASA satellite footage, which said we underestimated our landfill emissions by a factor of between 2 and 3, unofficially, based on that, it's our number 2 source of methane. And if you look over the next 10 years, it's on course to become number 1 because it's growing at twice the rate of agriculture emissions.
And that's just basically in the landfill, all our crap breaking down and...
Yep.
Okay. And so...
Stuff that rots without air.
And so when you're considering climate change and what can be done, how much of an impact can we have by dealing with the issue of methane, and how much of the methane issue itself can be dealt with?
So the answer to the first question, it's absolutely huge, absolutely huge. The good news about methane is because it stays in the atmosphere for a shorter period of time, if you stop it going into the atmosphere, you have an immediate impact on climate change. So whilst it hasn't been proven yet, I suspect that a lot of the reasons we're having these extreme weather events much more commonly than we thought, wasn't supposed to happen for another 20 years, is because methane levels have gone parabolic. So if we can do anything to reduce that, the impact's going to be felt immediately in terms of fewer extreme climate events.
Sorry, just to interrupt, these extreme climate events, is that provable that we've got more of them, or is the media just reporting on more of them?
If you look at what's happened, they've basically doubled since the 1970s. There has been analysis done on that.
Okay.
Yes. And that was about 5 years old. Since, if you update it to now, I don't know if a study's been done, but yeah, even 5 years ago, it's doubled since the 1970s.
It's not scientific, but it certainly feels like there's more events. It feels like when you put the news on, there's more big fires. There's, we had the big fires in Greece. We've had the big fire in Hawaii, the massive fires that seem to happen every year in Canada. We have massive flash flood events. I think Greece has just gone from fires to floods.
They have.
Yeah.
And where I grew up, that was flooded. That looks completely different to how it did. Bridges washed away, surf club deck washed away, people's houses, huge amounts of sand inundated them, roads cut off, roads destroyed. So I've seen it in my own neighborhood where I grew up in, and it just never used to happen, ever, in that volume.
And wasn't like a third of Pakistan underwater as well? Yeah. Which also sounds insane.
I would say, if anything, the media isn't reporting enough because you don't hear after the first couple of days. But yeah, a third of Pakistan underwater.
Yeah, which is insane, really.
Yeah,
it's a third of a whole country underwater. Okay, so those listening, Danny's brought up some data. Number of recorded natural disaster events, 1970 to 22.
Okay, so it's more than doubled.
Yeah, so in the 70s, it was, what's that, about 80, 62, 71, 50, and then up to 467. So that's a 1,000% increase? And then it's kind of looks like the Bitcoin price from, doesn't it? Looks like the Bitcoin chart. And so the trend, like when after it spiked in early 2000, it looks like there's like a downtrend.
Yeah, this one goes up to 2022. I'll be interested if you include this year.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of these challenging charts, though, because you look at it and go, okay, right, I see it, but how much better is the reporting? Oh, look at this. Yeah. So we go down to the 1900s and you've got like
a Bitcoin chart, doesn't it?
It does look like the Bitcoin chart. If anyone's seeing this, you'll have to go on YouTube and see it. Danny, you'll stick that in the show notes, right?
Yeah, I don't know how much sort of weight you can put on these early years, though.
Yeah, well, but any of it, I wonder how good the reporting, because this could come to how good the reporting is. So I could trying to be as objective as possible. It might be that the reporting is getting better, but it certainly feels different. I know last summer in the UK, we've had an entirely wet summer this year. Although today in the UK is a record, or yesterday they had record high temperatures. But last summer was insanely hot. It felt like in the UK you never seem to get the heat that feels like you're in the Caribbean, and it did. And my football team, we're going to play games where the pitches were just dry as fuck, and the grass was yellow. It was weird. It was stuff I'd not seen. I remember specifically one game we were at, we had to stand in the shade because it was so hot. That's the kind of thing I've experienced in Las Vegas and Barbados, not the UK. So anecdotally, I feel like this is right, but that's not scientific.
Well, I think that's what we have to go by, though, is to trust our own experiences. And a lot of the time, because we're in this post-truth world, that's what I come back to. And I say, well, yeah, you're right. That could be just because of bad reporting. But what does my experience tell me? My experience tells me that we're facing these things really often, and it never used to be this often at all. Because I live in New Zealand, so I'm miles away from anywhere in the world, everyone I talk to is in a different country. And I'll be talking to people from Sydney and sometimes London, sometimes New York, and sometimes in Hawaii. I've got a client in Hawaii who was intimately involved in what just happened there, and it totally changed his life over that period of time. Some of his clients had been directly affected by that area which was burnt. And then I'm talking to one of our advisors in New York, and I'm saying, hey, how's things going? He said, oh, we just had flooding. And before that, we had an infestation of caterpillars, which have killed all the trees, and it's because it's warmer than it should be. And then after that, we had a whole lot of wasps that have just embedded themselves in my bathroom because it's warmer than it should be. And so, how we used to get together with someone, we talk about the weather maybe just to break the ice. We're still talking about the weather, but now it's talking about extreme weather. And that never used to happen. So I notice it. It's like, how many of these people, and in California, we start the conversation with talking about the latest wildfires there. That never used to happen. And I'm old enough now, because I'm in my 50s, to remember we never used to talk about this stuff when we got in conversations with other people in different parts of the world. So our common sense is telling us this is happening more frequently.